Well, good morning. I'm Norma. Today's reading is from the Gospel of Luke, which was written by Luke, a traveling companion of Paul. It contains some stories that aren't found in the other Gospels, like this very confusing parable sandwiched between the familiar parable of the prodigal son and the story of the rich man and Lazarus, which are also unique to the book of Luke. In the introduction to the book, Luke writes that he has carefully investigated accounts of events by eyewitnesses to tell the story of the fulfillment of God's covenant with Israel, now through the person of Jesus. Today's reading is entitled, The Parable of the Dishonest Manager, and I'm reading chapter 16, verses 1 to 9. Then Jesus said to his disciples, There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. So he summoned him and said to him, What is this I hear about you? Give me an account of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer. Well, then the manager said to himself, What will I do, now that my master is taking the position away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do so that when I am dismissed as manager, people may welcome me into their homes. So summoning his master's debtors one by one, he asked the first, How much do you owe my master? And he answered, 100 jugs of olive oil. And he said to him, Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 50. And then he said to another, How much do you owe? And he replied, 100 containers of wheat. And he said to him, Take your bill and make it 80. And his master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourself by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. Well, in this story, we have an incompetent manager who's been squandering his master's property. Well, when the rich man finds out, he summons him to give account and then fires him. Well, the manager, now facing loss of status and financial security, worried about his future. You see, he isn't strong enough for manual labor, and he's too proud to beg. So he comes up with this plan to ingratiate himself with the master's debtors by reducing the amount each owes, hoping that in return they might take him in. Now be clear, what he is proposing is to steal further from the master in order to secure his own well-being. But in a surprise twist, the master commends the manager for his shrewdness instead of punishing him. Now, the one thing that all the commentators agree on is that this is a very confusing parable. So why didn't Jesus clearly explain things instead of masking their meaning in these perplexing stories? Well, N.T. Wright explains that Jesus didn't tell parables to provide friendly little illustrations of abstract theology. He told parables because what he was doing was so different, so explosive, and so dangerous that the only way he could talk about it was to use stories. You see, it is meant for those who, with open hearts to hear and open minds to dig deeper into Scripture. Parables are not meant to be read literally. You see, God's not advocating that we should cheat or deal dishonestly to get ahead. And one thing is clear, while we struggle to understand what Jesus is saying, when the Pharisees heard the story, they ridiculed him for its absurdity. Now we read that the manager was called to give an account. You see, everything we do matters. And we too, one day, will have to give an account for what we have done with our lives. Like the dishonest manager, there are times when I react out of fear and self-interest rather than by what is right. And I find some comfort in knowing that God can turn even my selfishness into something praiseworthy. Now, while I was tempted to skip over the final verses of this parable, I feel I owe you a brief explanation So these are some thoughts I've taken from comments by Dr. Petra from Catholic Productions. Now, who are the children of this age and the children of light? Well, first century Jews understood that there are two creations. So the children of this age belong to our fallen, sinful world that will one day be replaced by the world to come, full of light, peace, and justice. The children of the light, then, are those destined to live in this new world. So in this parable, the dishonest manager, clearly a son of this age, is more forward-thinking than the children of light. Now Jesus adds a second twist in verse 9. Make friends for yourself by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. Now, Jesus is not talking about earthly wealth or making friends for earthly gain, but he is pointing us towards the final judgment. In essence, he is saying that all our wealth or possessions do not belong to us. We are just stewards of the Lord's money, and we are to generously use our resources to help the poor in order to receive reward in the age to come. Okay, well, for issues of my own, this is not where I had hoped the story was going. So I'm going to just leave it there. And I want to pluck it out of that first century Judaism into our troubled present by straying just a little from the intent of the story. Most of us are reeling in the aftermath of the election, one on a platform of lies, hatred, and divisiveness. Jesus' followers must have experienced the same myriad of emotions as they stood by helplessly as Jesus was arrested, having been betrayed by his friend. Then offered a spark of hope as Herod and Pilate refused to find him guilty of any crime, only to be extinguished by the cries from the crowd to crucify him. Many couldn't even bear to witness the cruel execution, and they hid in fear of what the religious authorities would do to them. But God's very nature is love. And while we wrestle with the darkness that has fallen, I trust in God's goodness. I believe that the gifts humanity needs most are love, forgiveness, unity, and truth. We are being called to be good stewards of generous acts of kindness and compassion. And so, my dear, dear friends, my prayer for each of us is to stand firmly grounded in God's love. Care for one another and do not lose hope. The darkness will not prevail. Okay, I know this sounds a little Pollyanna, and I firmly believe this to be true. But in the inevitable days when despair is winning, I invite you to Google laughing baby videos. You see, even Jesus understood that the joy that small children can bring. And when I watch a small baby laughing at something ordinary or silly, I can't help but laugh myself. And at least for a moment, life doesn't seem so bad. So take good care. Until next time, God bless. Bye for now.